welcome to a special edition of the North American Update. My name is Dan Show, but you can call me Frodan. Now let's talk about everything about MLG Dallas, also known as Frodan's tournament, to look forward to. There are 4 primary groups for MLG group play. Let's start things off with group letter A. We have Leenock facing off Open, Oz versus Hiva, Vibe versus San, and Hero versus Open. Now, I feel like if everything plays out correctly, Leenock will be facing against Hero for the finals of that group, with Leenock advancing. Over in Group B, we have Naniwa versus Open, Hwangson versus Baby Knight, Grubby versus Flash, and the STC also facing another Open. Now, I kind of debated about this, and I think Hwangson's going to advance really far because Protoss versus Protoss, he seems to be very strong. He's been training with Greetorb, and Naniwa hasn't been able to get a lot of practicing because his mouse has been offline. So I think Hwangson is going to advance in Group B over the STC. Group C is by far the group of death. Let me read you off the list of names. Violet versus Open Slot, Major versus Life, Revival versus Soulkey, and Tasia versus an Open Slot. It's really hard to predict who's going to go far, but how can you bet against the current GSL champion, Life? Although I say Tasia will beat Life in the final because MLG is a different tournament. We've seen Life prepare for GSL and TSL tournaments, which is a different format. You get time to prepare for your opponent, but Tasia, he's the king of MLG. He's won a title before, and these kind of tournament is where he excels. And lastly, over in Group D, it's also a tough one as well. We have Heart versus an Open Slot, Bomber versus Scarlet, Daisy versus Sue, and First versus an Open Slot. Now this one's a little bit tricky to pick because all these players can go really far on their best days, but on their worst days, they look kind of like an average player. I think the most consistent player out of all of them in these kinds of formats will be Bomber. I think Bomber will go really far and face off against First, who has been placing second in a lot of tournaments. So Bomber will be advancing from Group D. Now these groups I think will play out according to this timeline based off of the Open player losing. But I don't think that's actually going to be the case because these Open listed entrants are extremely strong. Let's talk about Rain, SK Telecom's Rain. That's the current OSL champion and the WCS Asia winner. MC and Pold, who have done well in every single foreign tournament. And let me read you off some of the other people I think is worth spotlighting. Craig, who recently joined Axiom. Jukto, who recently joined Clarity Gaming. Moonglade, who's coming all the way from Australia. How well will he do? San, who's been #1 GM on North American Ladder and recently joined Team Light. How well will he fare? And Huck, who's been recently turning a page, a former MLG champion, the foreign hope. Will he shine in the Open bracket? So to wrap it up, I want to also do a top 4 predictions based off the MLG final results. I think the first one's an easy one. It's SK Telecom's Rain, who's done well in OSL, WCS. I think he's a favorite to win it all. And I think Rain is going to be the person that everyone measures their play up against. Another player I want to pick is Tasia, and I think a lot of people say he's on the downhill curve, but don't forget that Tasia excels in these kinds of tournaments where preparation isn't king, and it comes down to fundamental mechanics and situational awareness. Another pick I want to also point out is Leenock, because Leenock, every single MLG he attends, he does incredibly well because his style is something that people aren't necessarily used to, and it's also a style that requires you to be on your tip-top shape. It's an endurance tournament, and Leenock's aggressive style may be too much for some people to handle. Last but not least, I think Bomber is going to come out and do really well. He's performed well in previous MLGs, and he hasn't been able to showcase a lot of his talent in GSL. Maybe some people aren't prepared for his builds, and I think the Startail Terran has what it takes to make the top 4. The last thing I want to do is a shout out to the top foreigner, which I think Scarlet is going to place at least in the top 12, maybe in the top 8. It's time for her to shine. She hasn't proven herself outside of WCS, but if there's anything that we've seen out of the past few months, Scarlet is a monster. That does it for my previews and predictions. What do you guys think? If you're the first person to contact me correctly predicting the top 4 finishers for MLG Dallas, I will personally reward you with a Season 5 subscription pass with premium access to everything that we have. That does it for North American Update from Trenton to Denton and everything in between. If you have anything worth spotlighting or you want to contact me about your predictions, email me, dan@nasl.tv, or tweet at me @Frodan on Twitter. Have a good night, peace out, and enjoy the show.